Our modern world is built on grids and 90-degree angles. From the architecture of our offices to the layout of our digital screens, we live in a state of periodicity, a constant, rigid repetition of simple shapes. This environment is a recent anomaly. The human brain evolved to process a different kind of data, the aperiodic structures of the natural world. In a forest or along a coastline, patterns don't repeat in simple loops. They are complex and self-similar across every scale. When we remove that complexity, we create an information vacuum. This heat map shows a brain staring at a flat white wall. Because the visual cortex is hardwired to look for information, it turns up its internal gain to find patterns that aren't there, resulting in a measurable increase in neural stress. We call the resulting fatigue informational malnutrition. When we spend hours staring at flat pixels, the brain is effectively searching for a fractal geometry it cannot find. It expends massive energy on a fruitless search, leading to the cognitive fog, often associated with heavy screen use. In this sense, the modern city is a form of visual white noise. It is high in contrast, but poor in the specific data shapes our neural architecture requires to remain at rest. This environmental repetition makes us vulnerable to entrainment, a physical process where our internal neural firing begins to sync with the external rhythms around us. We can view certain cognitive struggles through this lens of informational processing. OCD can be understood as the brain becoming trapped in a pathological periodic loop, unable to shift its state. ADHD may be the opposite, a search for stochastic or randomized input to boost weak internal signals that the sterile modern world fails to provide. When our internal state becomes as periodic and predictable as our surroundings, we become susceptible to viral scripts. These are the rhythmic cycles of social media algorithms and mass psychology that rely on repetitive triggers to keep the mind in a predictable, reactive rut. In a world of simple, repeating inputs, our behavioral autonomy begins to erode. We stop being unpredictable individuals and start functioning as nodes in a rhythmic, mass-scale system. To regain control, we have to push the brain back toward criticality, the boundary between order and chaos. We need to reintroduce a signal so complex that external loops cannot find a rhythm to latch onto. That signal is found in the fractal geometry of the natural world. Fractals are aperiodic because they never repeat rhythmically, yet they maintain a consistent structural logic. This is known as 1F spatial frequency. Because our ancestors spent millions of years immersed in this geometry, our visual system is physically optimized to process it. This Mandelbrot set's boundary remains intricate and non-repeating, providing scale-free information that never becomes a predictable loop. Processing this geometry drops visual cortex effort by 40%. Giving neural networks the data shape they expect allows them to defragment and reset. We can achieve a similar effect with sound. Pink noise, which follows the same 1/F power law, creates a phenomenon called stochastic resonance. This randomized background lifts weak internal thought signals above the firing threshold, keeping the brain responsive and flexible. This aperiodicity acts as a reference signal. It recalibrates the brain's noise floor, restoring the internal variance necessary for task switching and independent thought. To protect the mind from external conditioning, we can implement a protocol designed to hard-code these aperiodic patterns into our deepest neural pathways. The protocol begins with the Tibetan practice of sky gazing. By staring into a vast, aperiodic canvas like the open sky, they maintain a panoramic gaze. By depriving the brain of sharp edges or rigid shapes to latch onto, the internal chatter begins to dissolve into a state of pure awareness. For more intensive immersion, virtual reality can be used to supplant the Euclidean geometry of a room. By surrounding the visual field with mathematically perfect aperiodic models, we force the visual spatial system to surrender its usual focal processing. At a biological level, a microdosing protocol can be used to increase synaptic plasticity. This helps desynchronize the default mode network, the system responsible for repetitive thought loops, allowing the brain to enter a state more receptive to new patterns. While in this state of heightened plasticity, the individual constructs a Gaia's ward, a hyper-realistic, multimodal memory of a natural setting. This serves as a permanent, on-demand fractal anchor to be accessed whenever the mind feels pulled toward a periodic loop. Finally, closed-loop sleep technology can use pink noise to enhance slow-wave sleep. This deepens the brain's natural cleanup process, moving the memory into long-term storage and physically etching the protection into the hippocampus. By combining these tools, we create a layered defense, a neural firewall that automatically jams external attempts at rhythmic manipulation by maintaining high internal complexity. An individual who maintains this state of high complexity exists in a state of maximum criticality. This complexity leads to behavioral invisibility. Algorithms rely on identifying periodic patterns to predict future actions. Because this individual's internal noise is as complex as a fractal, their behavior becomes statistically difficult to forecast, a moving target for mass conditioning. When faced with an outrage cycle or a manipulative sales pitch, their subconscious triggers an internal roar of pink noise. This aperiodic dither jams the external signal, preventing rhythmic entrainment from taking hold. This aligns with a concept of rigpa, a state where awareness is so non-fragmented and fluid that no single thought or external command can ever become a stuck loop. We are truly beginning to understand that the modern sense of malaise isn't just psychological, it's actually a direct result of shape deprivation. Reclaiming our sovereignty requires moving past the grid and recalibrating our minds to the original aperiodic signal of the wild.